A little crossover action, a little Egg Bowl crossover action. We finally have a Locked On Mississippi State. I'm Locked On Ole Miss. Let's do a little Egg Bowl crossover right here on the Locked On Podcast Network.
You are Locked On College Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome to the inaugural Egg Bowl crossover. I know you've all been waiting for this. I'm Stephen Willis of Locked On Ole Miss. He is Jaron Spor of Locked On Mississippi State, and it's going to be a fantastic time. On today's show, we're going to talk about storylines in this game and what you need to pay attention to. We are going to talk about the fact that Locked On Mississippi State is a thing, and I no longer have to talk with Jake Wimberly every year before the game. And finally, what is at stake in this Egg Bowl? So we'll talk about that. Thank you very much for making the Locked On Podcast Network your first listen every morning. Check out Locked On Mississippi State. Check on Locked On Ole Miss. We will set you up first thing in the morning. We appreciate it. And hello to the insiders and everydayers that make this show what it is. And what it is right now is the number one sports podcast network in the entire country. And that is all because of you. It's available wherever you get your podcast, your team, every day. Now, before we get started, I do want to let you know that today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5. And if that bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Download the app today. Jaron, man, welcome. This is the first time that we have done a crossover, that, you know, the Egg Bowl crossover. And I've been looking forward to this one all year, man.
Yeah, me too. This was the one that we kind of circled when we came on board back in March now. So it's flying by. But it's going to be a lot of fun. I mean, Mississippi State's fighting for a bowl eligibility. Ole Miss is fighting for a playoff berth. What more could you want in a game like that?
Yeah, you probably want your coaching search rectified, whatever. You might want that to happen. But yeah, there's a lot for both teams to play for. And, you know, listen, Jeff Lebby famously was at Ole Miss for a couple of years. He was there with Matt Corral, and Mississippi State has been right on the cusp of winning some pretty big games over the course of the season. I see a world where they could be 8-3 right now or something like that. And that's interesting to me because this game, I do think that Ole Miss and Mississippi State is a bad matchup for Mississippi State. I mean, Ole Miss has the offensive line, the defensive line, and the running back, most importantly, after what Ahmad Hardy did last week. Now they get to face the guy who leads the nation in broken tackles. I think it's a good matchup for Ole Miss, but with all of the uncertainty and all of the noise around, and there's nothing more dangerous than a 5-win Egg Bowl team, this game is going to be, I don't know if fun's the right word, but it's going to be must-watch television.
Yeah, and before Ahmad Hardy, it was Nate Frazier who went off against Mississippi State. They've kind of struggled stopping the run, and as you mentioned, their defensive line hasn't played great. The offensive line hasn't played great. But, yeah, I mean, the big thing for Mississippi State this year is they were 2-10 last year, but they've been competitive in almost every game this year. I mean, obviously the Missouri game got away, and then the Georgia game got away as well. But other than that, they've been pretty competitive. Even the A&M game looks lopsided, but it was like a one-score game going to the fourth quarter. And I did a show on Wednesday where I talked about why this is a success, even though a lot of people are saying it's not, that are Mississippi State fans. But I think that's just because they're kind of being prisoners of the moment. You start 4-0 and things like that. But I think this is because they've been competitive in all these games. That's what you wanted to see. Because last year, and I went through it on yesterday's show, they were blown out in several games. And so that's what makes this game even more interesting, is because it was a good game last year when Mississippi State wasn't very good. And now this year, they're much improved. But I think Ole Miss, maybe not as talented as last year, but they don't have the lulls, I feel like, or the loose-focused kind of performances like they did last year.
Last year was a more talented team by far. It was a more talented team. This is a better team.
Yeah.
This team would beat last year's team by 2 touchdowns.
Yeah.
And that's a weird thing to think of because this isn't as talented as a team. But there's no Trey Harris on this team. There's no Jackson Dart on this team. There's no Walter Nolan or Princely Amon-Mielen on this team. There's no Trey Amos on this team. And because of that, it just takes a tick down a little bit. But what they do really well is Trinidad Chambliss basically plays point guard from the quarterback position to where they complete passes to 7, 8, or 9 wide receivers. When a year ago with Jackson Dart, it was mainly one guy. You would have somebody with 7 or 8 catches, and then the next leading receiver would have 3. Well, this one is like 4, 4, 4, 3, 3. It's the old Mike Leach principle, talking to a Mississippi State guy. Get the guys on your offense the ball, and that's the definition of balance. And whenever that happens, the other team doesn't know who they have to take away. And
right.
if you know that, the offense is going to be a little bit better. And because of that, they're able to overcome the defense taking a step back.
Yeah, I'm glad you talked about that because I think, and so I'm not saying Trinidad's better than Jackson Dart because I think Jackson Dart is a better quarterback, and we see what he's doing in the NFL. But Jackson, very similar to the team, would have those kind of like head-scratching performances where he just didn't have it there. Whereas I don't really see that from Trinidad. That's one thing, to your point, where I think this is a better team, and it's big. The big reason why is because of Trinidad. I don't really see those inconsistent performances. Now, during games, he'll have like a lull here and there. Like against Georgia, he was great through 3 quarters, then kind of had a lull in the 4th quarter. But it was unrealistic to stay at the level he was playing at through 3 quarters. But he doesn't have those games where he just struggles. I've honestly been shocked that I don't see more Heisman buzz from him. And I know probably it's because he didn't start the year, but I mean, where would they be if he wasn't on the team and playing like this?
Yeah, you look at it. If they beat Mississippi State and finish 11-1, he should win every Heisman Award, every Maxwell, all the awards. Right. But he's not even in the top 10 voting list when they're looking at it right now. Even though he's throwing for over 300 every single week, seemingly, it's weird. It really is.
Yeah, go ahead. Oh, I was just saying, I write for Athlon Sports, and I was writing an article about Heisman odds. The story was actually about Fernando Mendoza, but I even scrolled down a while to find Trinidad Chambliss, and you have to hit show more at least one time, and then he's at the bottom of that. I mean, I don't see him in the top 10, like you mentioned on FanDuel, which is our sponsor, but I don't see him at all on there, which is crazy to me.
Yeah, it's nuts because, like I said, if Ole Miss goes 11-1 in what was supposed to be a rebuilding year, credit has to go to somebody. Right. Somebody allowed that to happen, and him or Kewan Lacy, that appears to be that's where I would put the credit for getting there. And Kewan Lacy, I'm telling you, against Florida, he completely took that game over, and he is turning into, before our eyes, he's basically turning into Derek McFadden.
Yeah. Yeah, no, he's had a great season. I remember the first time he really popped for me. And the funny thing is when you look at his numbers in this game, they don't stand out, but it's the Oklahoma game when he had 27 carries for 78 yards and 2 touchdowns. Like it's 2.9 yards per carry, but that might be the best defense in college football. And they're one of the best run defenses in college football. And he had the big run early in the game. And I just felt like he had them kind of off balance for a lot of the game. And that was the first time I was like, and he had some big performances before that, obviously, Washington State, Kentucky, Georgia State, over 100 yards. But that was the first game I was like, this guy is a little different. And then obviously he had the big game against South Carolina, like the game after that. And then that's kind of where he's taken off since then.
Yeah, it is really interesting to see. Anyway, when we come back, we're going to talk about having Locked On Mississippi State finally a part of the family and how good it is to see them. But this is the Locked On Ole Miss and Locked On Mississippi State podcast coming at you live. So stick around. The NBA is back, and there's no better place to get in on the action than with FanDuel. It's America's the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you missed the start of the game or you want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score next to fourth quarter comebacks. Plus, you can even combine your bets into a same-game parlay for a shot at an even bigger payout. It helps keep every game exciting, especially when you are making that late push. Right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So head to FanDuel.com and sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Hey, do us a favor, whichever channel you're watching this on, like and subscribe to the podcast subscribe to the podcast on whichever audio podcatcher you're listening to, and give it a 5-star review. It costs nothing, but it keeps all of this free. And don't forget, Locked On is getting ready to change the game yet again, all in the name of having fun following your team. It's coming in December. More details as it comes available. And thank you for making Locked On Ole Miss your first and listen of the day. And thank you for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast in America. That's a pretty cool deal.
Mm-hmm.
So one thing, Jaron, it's really cool. I just had my 4th anniversary with Locked On. And the previous 3 were crossovers with Jake Wimberly from 105.5 in Jackson or Madison, Mississippi. He was my go-to. And the reason I went with Jake is because I went to elementary and middle school with him and all of that. And we used to play like Little League together. So, but he was the person, my go-to on these crossovers. So he was there in 2022. He was there in 2020. All of that stuff came up. And the whole time I wanted Locked On Mississippi State to become a thing because Mississippi is a weird state. Mm-hmm. It just is. Whenever there's just a Locked On Ole Miss, the first question you're going to get from people is, what do you have for Mississippi State? You don't want to sign up for one and not have the other because that's going to affect your bottom line. You don't want to cut half your audience off. And it's really cool to have Jaron participating in the network and getting ready for what's going on. So from an Ole Miss guy, I do want to say, welcome, man.
Well, thank you. We're happy to be here. Landon obviously co-hosts the show with me, but he wasn't able to do the crossover. But no, we're really happy to be here. Like I said, we started in March. We got thrown right into the fire because it was right when the NCAA tournament started for basketball. So that was a lot of fun. And then right after that, Chris Lemonis gets fired on the baseball coach. And so we're going through all that. And then obviously they hire Brian O'Connor. And it looks like baseball is going to have a great season this year, or at least, should have a great season. So we got thrown into it right off the bat. But this was kind of always the one that this crossover was the one we've been circling. And it makes it better that we have 2 weeks to prepare for this game, so we can do 2 crossovers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's going to be a lot of fun. We're going to do a crossover next Thursday as well, so hang around for that. We're going to get really into the nuts and bolts of the ball game the day before the game on Thursday next week. So right now we're just having a little bit of fun, and Jaron's allowing me not to talk about Lane Kiffin for more than 5 minutes, which I appreciate that at the moment. Jaron, we talked about storylines in this game. What is the 1 or 2 players that Ole Miss fans that may not be familiar with Mississippi State that they need to pay attention to?
Well, I think the biggest one, and we'll have to kind of see if he ends up playing in this game, is Brenen Thompson. Because when he got injured, the wide receiver, he has, I believe, 868 yards receiving this year and 6 touchdowns. But when he got injured, I believe he was either tied for first or he was in first in the SEC in receiving yards. But he obviously has an extra game on some of the other guys. But he got hurt in the first quarter, had a big 54-yard catch against Missouri, got hurt. So we'll see if he ends up playing. If he doesn't, Anthony Evans is kind of the next guy I would mention. And I always have to mention them together because if people have watched Mississippi State this season, and Jeff Lebby's even talked about it, they are a 2 wide receiver offense. They don't have many receivers stepping up outside of those 2. But both of them can go off for big performances, and they're both speed guys. Anthony's a little bigger than Brenen. So those would be the 2 I would mention. I would actually kind of mention them as one because they're 1A and 1B. The other one on defense, obviously a lot of people know about Isaac Smith, but I've been a big Jerron Manning fan all season. He's been the transfer from Old Dominion. He's had a really good year. He actually leads the team in tackles with 76. He has 3 tackles for loss, 4 pass deflections. He's just been really good in that secondary. So I like him a lot. And then the last one I would mention is Fluff Bothwell, the running back. He was off to a really good season and then has kind of died down since he got hurt against Texas A&M. He has 559 yards, 6 touchdowns on 5 yards per carry. He just hasn't looked right since the injury, but last week I felt like he had a little bit more burst than he's had since the injury. So hopefully this extra week off can get him back to normal.
And everybody that's watching this probably is aware of Kewan Lacy and Trinidad Chambliss. So I won't focus on them. I think the player that you need to look out for on the offensive side of the ball is tight end Daquan Wright. He is probably the best player on this entire offense, and he's a matchup problem at like 260 pounds, and he can really run. He is kind of a way to torture linebackers, so to speak. And defensively, it's Will Eccles, the defensive lineman out of Houston, Mississippi. He is quickly becoming a leader in that unit and has a chance, if he takes a step, to really take a step next year. So we'll see exactly what that looks like. But those are probably the two players you need to watch.
You know, it's funny. The one guy that he just feels like he pops on the screen every time I watch Ole Miss is Perkins. I really like him. I like him a lot. And like I said, every single time I watch him, and his stats aren't like mind blowing. I mean, he is second on the team in tackles. He does have 6.5 tackles for loss and 2 sacks, and also has an interception. He kind of does it all. But it's not like he's having these great numbers. But just every time I watch him, it just feels like he is always around the football.
Is it going to be Blake Shapen or is it going to be Kamario Taylor? That's probably the question, right?
Yeah, if you're asking me what I want, what Mississippi State fans want, that's going to be Kamario Taylor. What I think is going to happen is Blake Shapen. Just because, and I said this, I believe it was on Monday's podcast, I just feel like Jeff Lebby has tied himself to Blake Shapen. It almost feels like when Lebby took the job, Will Rogers obviously transfers out. And so Blake Shapen like put his full trust in Lebby. And it feels like Lebby is trying to return the favor kind of thing. Like, you put your trust in me. We had this struggle of a season. You got hurt. This year is your year. We're riding with you. Even though the numbers should tell you probably shouldn't at this point anymore. And you probably should go with Kamario Taylor. Like, I would understand it if Kamario still had his red shirt. And it's like, okay, well, we don't want to burn the red shirt. But he doesn't. He's already burned it. So I don't understand kind of just going down with the ship on this one, especially when you're one game away from a bowl game.
Well, in that case, and looking at one game away from hosting a playoff game and the biggest game in college football in the history of the state of Mississippi is what that playoff would be. I think you just need to try and win the game. You do whatever you think puts yourself in the best position to win the football game. For Ole Miss doesn't need to go for a single 4th down in this game. Not one. Not one. They need.
I always like the group chats when you get upset about them going 4th on 4th.
Yeah, it's just not one. This is a game, especially in that stadium, to where whenever you get stopped on a 4th down, it is an exponential momentum boost for the other team. And this Mississippi State team can score quickly. So if you're not careful, it could be 21-0 in a hurry. Right. So you need to be careful to take away from that. I think Ole Miss needs to actually play slow a little bit. You have the advantage running the football. They had 38 minutes of time of possession against Florida the other night. They have it in their quiver, essentially. So I think they should try and milk the clock and try and get out of there with the win, lower the number of possessions, and keep Mississippi State's defense on the field as long as possible.
Yeah, that would obviously be a good strategy. And I would say if you're Ole Miss, you want to start fast, because the one thing Mississippi State has done well this year is start pretty fast. I need to go back and look exactly how many times they've scored on their first drive, but it feels like almost every game. They put together a good first drive. And as you mentioned, if they go down and score and then Ole Miss goes for it on 4th or something, and then Mississippi State's able to take advantage of that, then you get down early, and that's just not what you want to do in this type of game. And that's the one thing I think, obviously Ole Miss fans and the team knows about it, but that's one thing that I've been surprised about when I've read post-game comments from other coaches is they don't really understand, it feels like, going into the game, what the cowbells in the stadium is kind of like until after the game. Then they're like, well, we were preparing for it, but we weren't ready for that. And so, and obviously with the bowl game at stake and all that stuff that you add to it, yeah, you don't want to get down 2 scores in this one.
Yeah, and that will not be a problem for Ole Miss because they are fully aware of what the Cowboy Bells can be. Anyway, when we come back, we are going to talk about what's at stake for both teams and just kind of riff and talk about the game just a little bit. This is the Locked On Ole Miss podcast. All right, so we are coming back. Locked On Ole Miss, Stephen Willis. Locked On Mississippi State, Jaron Spor. I'm excited about this game. I like that Mississippi State is better than they were a year ago. It bothered me that they were as bad as they were a year ago, honestly. And a lot of that had to do with, honestly, Blake Shapen getting injured and having to go with freshmen. So you had to deal with the growing pains. And then that guy just up and bailed. You're doing basically the same thing again. You have Blake Shapen as the starter with a true freshman behind him. With Kamario Taylor, I understand the athlete. I understand the ability and all of that, but he seems like he's an inconsistent thrower of the football right now. Is that an accurate description?
Oh yeah, that's definitely it. That's the thing. Like if you watch the two, it's not close as in who's the better passer. Like Shapen is clearly the better thrower. I think Kamario throws the downfield shots just as good as Shapen does. It's just the middle to short range throws, Shapen clears him. But the thing that I have seen is when Kamario comes in, the whole running game just opens up. And it's not just him. Like I've seen so many teams on the RPO or the read option just sell out to stop the running back because they're not afraid if Shapen pulls it. Shapen can pull it, and they know a safety 10 yards away will catch up to him when he only gains 1 yard. Whereas Kamario, I've seen teams early like still sell out for the running back because that's obviously what their game plan was. And then he busts a 10, 15-yard run. Now they're not selling out for him, which now lets Booth and Bothwell get some big runs. And so that's kind of an advantage that he brings to the roster. He's also a really good powerful runner. The one thing I will say is I understood going with Shapen at the start of the year and kind of keep him with him for a while because when you have that veteran guy, he's not going to make those freshman mistakes. And that's what you want to avoid if you're Mississippi State. The issue is lately he's been making the freshman mistakes. And so if he's going to make those mistakes, you might as well go with the younger, talented guy.
Yeah, it should be interesting. I do think that Ole Miss defensively, especially with the quarterback that struggles throwing the football a little bit, is inconsistent. At least he can do it. It's going to be a deep shot or bust type thing with the Ole Miss way that Ole Miss plays football. And it is going to be up on that defensive line, the Cam Franklin, the Santarin Perkins, the Will Eccles, those guys. You're going to have to maintain your rush lanes, and they have dealt with mobile quarterbacks for the majority of this season. So I think they'll be okay looking at that. I am looking forward to this game basically because of what it could mean. Ole Miss has won 4 out of the last 5 games in Davis-Wade stadiums. The only game that Mississippi State won was the Piss and the Miss in 2019. And it's one of those things. Win 5 out of 6, go to the playoffs. This game feels like it could be a coronation. But since it's the Egg Bowl, since there's nothing more dangerous than a 5-win Egg Bowl team, you have a little bit of pause. But, man, there's probably going to be a decent number of Ole Miss fans that are heading down to Starkville for this game.
Yeah, you want to talk about some crazy stakes for both teams. I mean, Jeff Lebby can silence all the critics that he's been receiving the last couple of weeks, which I still think is crazy. Literally, before the year, they were projected to win 3.5 games. They're at 5 wins, and people before the year would have been ecstatic at 5 wins. But because of how it's kind of happened, they're not. If he goes in and beats Ole Miss, which I don't think will knock them out of the playoff race. I really don't. I still think a 10-2 Ole Miss team probably gets in. But regardless, if he ends up going and wins that game, gets you to a bowl game, I mean, you want to talk about having a lot of backing from the donors, from the fans. Like Jeff Lebby will have all that back. And then maybe if Kiffin leaves, you guys won't take Lebby from us.
Possibly. I mean, obviously there are relationships up there, but I think they have a sitting head coach from the G5 level kind of earmarked if anything goes down. So we'll see how that trends as well. So should be pretty cool. The stakes for Ole Miss, this is simply the biggest game in program history. And that sounds silly because you're playing against a 5-6 Mississippi State team, but it has nothing to do with who Ole Miss is playing and has everything to do with what can happen if they win the game. Getting the home game in Vaught-Hemingway Stadium on December 19th or 20th would be a benchmark of a program that's turned the last corner and now they are competing at the next level. It can be done at Ole Miss. It can be, honestly, Mississippi State can point at Ole Miss and say it can be done here. Arkansas can point at Ole Miss. It can be done here. This is big for that tier of schools, in my opinion. And if Ole Miss can get the win in the Egg Bowl, get that home playoff game, or maybe even a bye of what's going on, and potentially if Ole Miss beats Mississippi State, you just need A&M to lose to Texas and Austin, and you need Auburn to beat Alabama in Auburn. That's all you need. If that happens, you're in Atlanta. I know Ole Miss fans probably don't want to go to Atlanta, but it's on the table. But the stakes for this game are honestly as high as Ole Miss has had potentially in their life. The big games in their history, like 1952 Maryland and all that, they're signaling their arrival onto the scene back in the day, that you still didn't know that game was meaningful before the game. It only after the fact that you were like, oh, that's a big deal. There was the Ole Miss LSU game in 59, there's been games, but this one with the meaning of it and everything, I genuinely think that Ole Miss fans, it cannot be overstated how important this is for Ole Miss and Ole Miss fans, and not winning this game would be disastrous. It absolutely would be disastrous.
And I think, we'll see what Kiffin does, but I think it's big for Lane Kiffin too, because the one critique that he gets still is, can you get to the playoff? Mm-hmm. You had that talented team last year, but you lose to Kentucky, you lose to Florida at the end of the year, and you don't end up making it. So all offseason you heard, like, I don't know if Kiffin can ever get it done. Can he get there? So that's another big game for him too, to put on his job searching resume. I don't know.
All right, Jaron, thank you so much for stopping by. And next week we got to do the crossover again, and we're going to get into the nuts and bolts of this football game. We're going to just have an extra crossover with Locked On Mississippi State and Locked On Ole Miss. We're going to be doing Egg Bowl crossovers this Thursday and next Thanksgiving. That's going to be the turkey that you get that day. Anyway, Jaron, thank you very much for stopping by. And thanks, everybody, for making Locked On Ole Miss and Locked On Mississippi State your first listen. For your second listen, check out Locked On SEC. Chris Gordy breaks down the best conference in all of college sports, from the rivalries to the championship and every game in between. Find the Locked On SEC podcast on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And, of course, I'm going to close it out the way I always close out podcasts. Hotty toddy, everybody. And remember, analytics is just the old English word that means bad football. We'll see you tomorrow.
Hail State.
Yeah, there we go. Egg Bowl is right around the corner. All right, Jaron.